The outer edges of the Zalari Empire were quiet, distant from the core systems and often ignored by High Command. But on this particular cycle, an unusual signal triggered alarms in one of their long-range sensor stations. At first, the station, officers assumed it was a stray meteor or a wandering mining drone, something ordinary. But when they focused the scan, a strange energy signature appeared, not matching any known species within Zalari space. The data was rerouted to the nearest command vessel orbiting the gas moon of Dravon 6, where it was analyzed with increasing concern. It was human. The ship had Terran markings, hidden beneath layers of alloy shielding, but unmistakably Earth-based, in origin. This was shocking not because humans were unknown, but because they were forgotten. 100 years ago, the Zalari had scanned Earth and concluded the species was primitive, limited to a single star system, and decades away from interstellar travel. That conclusion had led to humanity being dismissed entirely from strategic concern. Now, a human vessel was moving silently through Zalari territory, not requesting permission, not sending signals, and not behaving like a science ship or transport. It moved with precision and intent. High Command issued a quick response. Intercept and contain. 3 light cruisers, led by Commander Vare, were dispatched to intercept the vessel. Vare was confident. He had never fought a human before, but from the records, they didn't seem like a threat. When his fleet reached the edge of the Keelan, rift, and finally got visuals, that confidence began to weaken. The ship was massive, more than twice the size of any known human design, and its hull shimmered with a strange coating that confused sensor readings. Its name, barely readable beneath the dark outer plating, was IHS Revenant. No ship by that name existed in any known database. It moved slowly but deliberately, as though it had no fear. Attempts to contact it received no reply. Vare tried again, his voice steady but hiding a rising unease. The Revenant did not respond. It didn't turn. It didn't even acknowledge their presence. Standard procedure in such cases was clear: issue a warning shot and force compliance. Vare hesitated for just a second before authorizing a precision pulse meant to disable the ship's engine without damaging the core systems. As soon as the shot was fired, everything changed. The Revenant vanished from their sensors, not in a flash of speed, but as though it had never been there. Alarms screamed across the control panels, and Vare demanded answers his crew didn't have. Seconds later, one of the Zalari cruisers broke apart from within, as if something had torn through it invisibly, and before anyone could react, the second ship lost power completely, drifting helplessly in space. Vare's own ship tried to retreat, but the Revenant appeared behind them, silent and glowing faintly, as if watching. For the first time in his career, Vare felt fear he couldn't explain. The human ship didn't fire again, didn't speak, but made its message clear: do not follow. Vare stared at the data streaming in, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The readings didn't add up. No known weapon system could have done that kind of damage so quickly, and no human technology should have been capable of cloaking that completely. But here it was, right in front of him, real and deadly. The Revenant turned slowly and resumed its path deeper into Zalari space, ignoring what remained of the cruisers behind it. As it disappeared into the shadows of the next system, Vare was left with only one conclusion. Everything the Zalari believed about humans was wrong, and by the time High Command understood that, it might already be too late. The silence from the human warship was beginning to feel louder than words. As the IHS Revenant continued its slow, steady movement through Zalari space, the nearby cruisers kept sending hails, warnings, and demands for identification. But the ship didn't answer. It didn't change direction. It didn't even acknowledge their presence. 2 more cruisers, newer models with advanced targeting systems, were brought in to reinforce the response. They locked weapons, their sensors focused sharply on the strange human ship. Still, the Revenant showed no reaction. It floated forward, calm and unshaken, like it didn't care or didn't need to. Then, in the middle of all this tension, something happened that no one on the Zalari side could explain. The Revenant simply vanished. It didn't jump to hyperspace. It didn't leave a warp trail. There was no engine flare or energy spike. One moment it was there, clearly visible, and the next, it was gone, as if space itself had folded around it. Alarms rang out. Officers shouted across control decks. The lead cruiser began scanning wildly, broadcasting to command that they had lost contact with the unidentified ship. But before any adjustments could be made, one of the cruisers shuddered and buckled from within. Internal explosions tore through, the hull like invisible knives. There were no incoming projectiles, no warning of any kind, only sudden destruction. The entire ship began to collapse inward, breaking apart in complete silence, as though crushed by a force they couldn't detect. The remaining cruiser barely had time to react before its systems flickered and died. Every display went dark. Weapons, shields, propulsion, nothing worked. Panic set in as the bridge crew scrambled to bring anything back online. It was no use. Their ship was disabled, left adrift, and the Revenant was still nowhere to be seen. A message was sent back to Zalari High Command, this time not as a report, but as a distress signal. They had underestimated something far beyond their understanding. Somewhere in the data stream that reached command, the Revenant's last known, coordinates were shown, along with fragments of the imploding cruiser's black box data. There was no pattern, no signature to follow. The attacks had come from angles impossible to track. It was not a traditional enemy. It was precise, intelligent, and completely unafraid. Some on the command council tried to remain calm, insisting it was a fluke, that perhaps the ship had simply malfunctioned and exploded on its own. But the fear in the eyes of the surviving cruiser's crew told a different story. The officers spoke in low, shaky voices about being watched by something they couldn't see, about a cold feeling that moved through the ship moments before the systems failed. Zalari scientists reviewed the data and confirmed what no one wanted: to accept. The human ship had used technology they couldn't trace. It had struck 2 cruisers without warning and then disappeared, leaving no evidence behind. This wasn't just a warship. It was something else. Something designed for a purpose the Zalari had not prepared for. A weapon, yes, but not one built for large-scale battles. It was a tool of precision, of fear, made to eliminate threats before those threats even understood they were in danger. In the quiet that followed, with debris drifting silently through, the stars and one cruiser left powerless, High Command sat in stunned silence. They had thought humanity was weak, slow to adapt, and too distant to be a concern. Now they realized that humans had not only caught up, they had gone beyond. And, worse, the Revenant wasn't just here to explore. It had come with a reason, a mission, and that mission had just begun. Inside the heart of the IHS Revenant, deep beyond layers of steel and encrypted systems, the soft hiss of cryochambers broke the silence as the command pod began to thaw. Captain Mara Thorne opened her eyes slowly, her senses adjusting after decades in deep stasis. The ship's AI, Daedalus, brought up status reports, data streams, and a single line that stood out in red. Reactivation triggered. Threat proximity critical. That wasn't supposed to happen. She had been launched centuries ago not to fight, but to wait. The Revenant wasn't a normal warship. It was humanity's silent warning, placed like a loaded gun at the edge of the unknown, never meant to fire unless something truly terrible happened. Yet here she was, fully awakened, with systems running at full combat readiness. Mara moved with focus as she accessed mission logs and scanned the surrounding data, piecing together what had occurred during her long sleep. The ship had detected aggression, targeted scans, and a series of hostile engagements from the Zalari Empire. The name was familiar, an alien empire that Earth had once labeled as neutral, non-interfering. But somewhere during humanity's silence, the Zalari had crossed a line and the Revenant had responded by its core design. It had engaged without mercy, not because Mara ordered it, but because a hidden trigger buried deep in the protocol matrix had judged the threat real. As she stood in the command chamber surrounded by flickering holograms of destroyed enemy cruisers and intercepted signals, Mara understood the weight of what had happened. The Zalari thought they were dealing with a scout ship, perhaps even a relic. They had no idea that they had awakened something far older, far colder. She pulled up a black-coded file, the Revenant Protocol. It was the last measure, buried beneath diplomatic layers and peace-era programming. Only captains ranked, for Deep Stasis Command could authorize it. With a steady breath, she confirmed activation. The ship's systems responded immediately. The hull reconfigured slightly, revealing weapons long hidden within its armored sides. Communication interceptors reached out in silence, searching for enemy movements. Daedalus adjusted its tactical predictions, preparing for full engagement. Mara remembered the purpose behind this ship. It was a statement to the galaxy, not in words, but in action. Earth had decided long ago that if ever its people were harmed without cause in deep space, the answer wouldn't be a plea. It would be a warning written in fire. She accessed historical logs and found what had caused the trigger. A human colony, registered under peaceful expansion, had been destroyed 5 years ago near the edge of Zalari territory. No distress signals had made it back to Earth. No survivors. The attack had been covered up, hidden from public records, buried in bureaucratic silence. But the Revenant had learned the truth during its patrol cycles. And now, so had she. This wasn't just defense anymore. It was justice. Mara didn't speak as she reviewed the last image from the colony's outer perimeter. A school dome, half melted from orbital strikes, children's toys scattered in the dust. She closed the feed. Her face didn't show anger, only a calm resolve that came from training and purpose. The galaxy had forgotten what humans were capable of when pushed. That would change. She issued silent commands, setting course for Zalari High Command territories. The ship moved without hesitation. It did not roar. It did not flash. It simply vanished into the stars again, hunting not for revenge, but for truth, consequences, and the cold balance owed to those who thought no one would come. The Revenant had fully awakened, and with it, the part of humanity the universe had hoped would stay sleeping. Captain Mara Thorne stood in the dim light of the Revenant's command chamber as new data scrolled across the main display. The AI, Daedalus, had uncovered something buried deep in the communications logs, fragments of broken transmissions, scattered across time and static. With quiet focus, Mara watched and listened as Daedalus began reconstructing the pieces. They were messages from a forgotten human colony in the Varel system, once believed to be silent due to a failed communications relay. But now, the truth surfaced like a shadow rising from the depths. The colony had been destroyed 5 years ago, not by natural causes, not by accident, but by a direct attack from Zalari warships. It was quick, brutal, and covered up. The Zalari had erased the records, removed all official traces, and marked the system as unstable and unfit for habitation. They thought it was enough. They believed that humanity would never know, that one lost colony in deep space would go unnoticed. But the Revenant had been listening, and Daedalus had been watching. With each frame restored, the evidence grew clearer. This had not been a random strike. It had been a test. The Zalari had deployed new weapons, unknown energy types, precision, orbital bombardments, and even biological agents in small controlled zones. The colony's population had not only been attacked, they had been observed. Mara's eyes narrowed as she studied the scans showing heat signatures and timed explosions. It was cold, calculated, and entirely without warning. Her pulse stayed steady, but something burned in her chest that even cryo-sleep hadn't frozen. A promise. She remembered Earth's old laws of space, written when humanity first stepped beyond their star. If attacked without cause, respond with clarity and strength. Mara now saw what had triggered her awakening. The red line had been crossed long ago, but it was hidden under lies and silence. She turned from the display and walked toward the central console, her boots echoing softly in the silence. The decision was made. She would not send warnings. She would not seek answers from those who had buried the truth. The next step was to strike at the heart of those who thought the galaxy belonged only to them. Zalari High Command lay deep within, the central star fields of their empire, surrounded by fortified systems, sensor nets, and fleets designed to intercept anything that moved without permission. But the Revenant wasn't just any ship. Built in secret and hidden in the void, it had technology meant to slip through the blind spots of even the most advanced alien systems. Daedalus had already begun mapping the silent paths, gravity currents, magnetic shadows, and dead zones left behind by collapsed stars. As the course was set, Mara felt no fear. This wasn't about revenge, though the temptation was strong. It was about justice for those who had no voice, no defense, no chance. The Zalari had wanted to study human weakness, but instead, they had summoned a force designed to show just how strong humanity had become. Quietly, the Revenant shifted its course. Its engines didn't roar. Its weapons didn't glow. But inside, power was building, systems aligning, and a mission unfolding. Mara placed her hand on the activation panel, her voice calm as she issued her next command: prepare infiltration protocols. They would enter unseen, strike without warning, and leave a message in the only language the Zalari seemed to understand: strength, precision, and resolve. The galaxy had been quiet for too long, and in that silence, the truth had been hidden. But now, the silence was ending. The Revenant moved forward, and with it, the spirit of a species that refused to be forgotten. The stars no longer felt safe for the Zalari. Ever since the Revenant had moved into the heart of their empire, their once confident fleets had turned into restless shadows, searching blindly through the vast emptiness of space. High Command issued full alert, and hundreds of warships were mobilized. Cloaked satellites were launched, sensor buoys deployed across every major star lane, and patrol routes doubled across the outer colonies. The mission was simple: find the human vessel and destroy it before it reached the capital. But nothing went according to plan. The Revenant didn't follow the same rules of movement or warfare the Zalari were used to. One moment, it was a silent dot near the edge of a gas giant. The next, entire battle groups guarding that sector vanished without a trace. No distress calls, no fight, only silence and debris. The AI Daedalus guided the ship through folds of space the Zalari didn't even know existed, using tricks of quantum interference and gravitic distortion to mask its presence. Their sensors, no matter how advanced, couldn't hold a lock on it for more than a few seconds. In those seconds, the Revenant would strike, clean, surgical, and unstoppable. Destroyers drifted lifeless, their engines melted from the inside. Communication arrays on fortified stations suddenly turned against their users, broadcasting their own secrets back to the Terran vessel. It wasn't just warfare, it was psychological. The Revenant wasn't trying to win a battle, it was reshaping the battlefield itself. Commander Vare, once proud and respected, now stood alone among the few officers who had survived an encounter with the ship. His earlier mistake in underestimating the humans had cost the Zalari dearly, and now no one in high command trusted his advice. Still, he pleaded for them to consider a diplomatic approach. "Send a signal," he said. "Open communication. Let them speak." But his voice was drowned out by fear and pride. The Zalari had never needed peace before, and now, asking for it would be a sign of weakness. Yet as more fleets disappeared and as supply lines began to fracture from sudden strikes, the truth became harder to deny. The Revenant wasn't just a warship anymore, it had become something else: something larger than any single vessel. Rumors spread like fire through Zalari colonies. Miners in the asteroid belts whispered about a silent ship that moved through, the dark like a ghost. Traders spoke of wreckage fields appearing overnight where fleets once stood. Even children, who once learned of humans as a long-forgotten species, now told stories about a silent hunter from Earth that punished those who crossed a hidden line. The legend was growing, and legends don't negotiate. Captain Mara Thorne had not said a word to the Zalari since her ship reawakened. She didn't need to. Every precise strike, every vanished fleet, and every failed trap was a message louder than any broadcast. The Revenant had no interest in being understood. It had come with purpose, and that purpose was nearly complete. From the shadows of forgotten space to the heart of the Empire, it was carving a path not just of destruction, but of remembrance. Humanity had been silent for a long time, but silence was never the same as absence. Now, with every strike, the galaxy was learning that humans had not only survived, they had evolved into something more. And the Revenant, hidden in the folds of the void, was the proof. While the Zalari scrambled, the hunter moved closer, unstoppable and unseen. Far beyond the nearest colonies, orbiting a dying blue-white star, floated the most secure structure the Zalari had ever built, the Ether Citadel. It wasn't just a space station, it was a world-sized fortress, surrounded by a web of defense. Grids, automated warships, and shields strong enough to hold back entire fleets. High Command had activated it as their last defense, a final line drawn in the stars. The Revenant had cut too deep, moved too close, and now the most powerful force in Zalari history stood ready to face it. To most of the Council, it seemed like overkill. One Terran ship against an entire battle moon of weapons, but fear had silenced doubt. The Citadel came online with a hum that shook space, its power core glowing with controlled starfire, its cannons tracking everything within. Millions of kilometers, but Captain Mara Thorne had no intention of flying directly into the fire. She studied the Citadel from afar, watching its movements, its logic patterns, its rhythms. With Daedalus by her side, she didn't need to match fire with fire. She needed precision. The Revenant released its infiltration drones, tiny, invisible machines, each carrying a specific function. They scattered across gravitational folds and magnetic lines, slipping past the Citadel's outer layers like whispers through cracks. They didn't aim for shields or hulls. They targeted weak points in logic cores, blind spots in sensor data, power relays that flickered once every hour, and comm relays briefly exposed during reboots. Daedalus mapped the Citadel's entire architecture, not physically, but digitally, like solving a puzzle made of light and time. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a slow and silent collapse. The first sign came when one of the Citadel's outer turrets misfired and struck its own satellite. Then, sections of internal gravity failed, causing confusion among the defense teams. Seconds later, half of the Citadel's automated systems rebooted themselves without warning, exposing core pathways long thought hidden. The Revenant moved closer, still cloaked in silence, like a ghost circling its prey. It launched no full assault. Instead, it played a game the Zalari didn't understand, one move after another at quantum speed. By the time High Command noticed that their own data feeds were lying to them, it was too late. Screens showed clear space, but the enemy was already inside their defenses. Power began to drain from critical systems. Doors opened and locked at random. Weapon controls jammed, targeting systems turned off, and entire command branches were isolated from each other. Panic spread like static across every deck. Inside the central chamber of the Ether Citadel, the High Command sent out a single desperate message, more human than they had ever been before. We didn't know what. You were. We didn't know what humans had become. The message wasn't a strategy. It was fear. Understanding had come too late. Across from them, Far beyond their line of sight, Mara Thorne received the words in silence. Her face didn't change. Her voice was calm as she gave the response Daedalus had already cued. Now you do. No dramatic strike followed. No final explosion. The Revenant simply turned and left, its purpose fulfilled. Behind it, the Citadel remained, powerless, exposed, defeated not by force, but by knowledge, patience, and quiet precision. Across the Empire, word spread faster than official reports. A single Terran ship had brought the mighty Citadel to its knees without a single frontal assault. The myth of human weakness shattered. From that moment, the Revenant was no longer a warship or even a threat. It became something else, a shadow that reminded the stars that humanity was still here and it had never stopped watching. The Ether Citadel no longer shined in the dark. Once the pride of the Zalari Empire, the massive station now floated as a silent shell, powerless and still, surrounded by the scattered remains of the fleet that had failed to stop the Revenant. Across the Empire, military channels went quiet, patrol routes were canceled, and defensive command centers went dark out of fear rather than strategy. Then, without warning, every functioning screen, transmitter, and frequency across the Zalari network lit up with a single signal from the Revenant. It wasn't a threat, and it wasn't a demand. It was a message, clear and simple. Captain Mara Thorne's voice echoed through every ship, every station, every city that still had power. Humanity remembers. We protect our own. And we don't. Forget. The words hit harder than any weapon. It wasn't rage or chaos. It was certainty, calm and cold, like a closing chapter no one could rewrite. And just as suddenly as the Revenant had come, it was gone again. One final shift in gravitational readings marked its departure. No one could track the exact direction. Some said it warped back to deep space. Others believed it folded into a dimensional layer beyond known physics. There were no sensor trails, no coordinates, no hint of destination. It vanished like a whisper in a silent room. In the weeks that followed, the Zalari struggled to understand what had happened. Engineers picked through the ruins of the Citadel, unable to explain how systems had failed without any external attack. Scientists debated whether the Revenant was truly a human ship or something more, perhaps the next step in Terran evolution. High Command gave no official answer. How could they, when they still didn't fully understand what had been unleashed? But the people of the Empire, especially those on the outer colonies, began to speak of the event not as a battle, but as a warning. Stories spread in hushed tones about a ghost ship from Earth that arrived without notice and left only silence and shattered pride behind. Children who once studied human history as a minor footnote now whispered of Earth with wide eyes and quiet respect. And in time, a new phrase took root in Zalari culture. It wasn't an official law or rule, but everyone understood it. It was taught in classrooms and written in star charts. Never provoke the silent stars, because the humans are listening. It became a reminder that strength could hide in silence, that peace was not permission, and that old enemies, even if forgotten, may still be watching. As for Captain Thorne, no one ever saw her again. Some believed she returned to Earth and was buried in a secret facility. Others thought she and the Revenant had merged into one, human instinct and machine precision, forever guarding the edge of known space. A few claimed she still drifted beyond the reach of light, waiting for another forgotten cry, another hidden attack on her people. Whatever the truth, the legend remained. The Revenant was no longer just a warship. It was a story, passed between generations, a warning dressed as a myth, a symbol of what happens when a sleeping protector is awakened. The Zalari had once thought humans were quiet, weak, and easy to ignore. Now, they built their future with a new kind of caution, always watching the stars for a flicker that didn't belong. Because somewhere out there, in the endless dark, humanity's silence was still listening, and would answer again if it ever had to.